going to talk about a fundamental mental health skill that hasn't quite made its way out into the world yet. It's something we talk about a lot in psychology. It's called diffusion. And let's see here. Let's go to the next slide. Right. So diffusion, the way you want to think about diffusion is by the way, it's something that we all struggle with to some degree. We actually see it being a particularly big problem in people who are suffering from anxiety disorders, depression. And when we just feel down on ourselves and overwhelmed, we tend to get into the state of diffusion, which is to believe that our feelings and our thoughts are reality. So it's like we're fusing our sense of self, our sense of the world with our feelings and thoughts. And it's hard to separate. And this fusion, where we think our thoughts and feelings are automatically reality, can really get in our way emotionally, because then it's hard to get distance and start working with those feelings. And the best evidence-based therapies out there, things like cognitive behavioral therapy and acceptance and commitment therapy, they've developed a range of techniques for helping us defuse from those thoughts and feelings so we can gain that distance, create a space between having the feeling and reacting to it. And that just gives us more power to see clearly and decide how to respond when we're challenged. And honestly, all of us fall prey to diffusion because of the nature of the human brain. Our brains are judging brains. So I want you to do a mini experiment with yourself to sort of illustrate this. So look at this sentence: I am a good person. Now, I'd like you to repeat that to yourself silently for a few moments. Repeat it a few times over. And as you're repeating it, observe your mind as you repeat it. I am a good person. I am a good person. I'm going to take a few moments and let you do that. Just observe what happens when you repeat the sentence. Now, when you sit with a simple thought like this for a few minutes, most of us find that our mind gets into judgment mode. We become problem solvers and problem finders. So rather than just stick to the assignment, which in a way it was just for us to repeat the sentence, I am a good person, what our minds do is they start to judge and argue. You might have noticed that you started to have associations with the sentence, and maybe you started to think things like, well, I'm not really a good, am I a good person? How can I be? Oh, of course I'm a good person. Here's what I did yesterday, of course. And I did make that mistake, but I'm still a good person. But, all of these thoughts start crowding our brains. And so automatically our brains make judgments about ourselves and the world. And because we tend towards these judgments, these stories we tell, we get fooled into believing that having a thought is being a thought. And so that's another reason that we fall prey to fusion, because we have storytelling brains. We have judging brains that argue and judge, and we have storytelling brains. And we know human beings are storytelling animals. Our stories become our realities. And this little experiment, the second experiment, illustrates that. It's called the bad bottle. So now look at this bottle. It's just a plastic water bottle. Now I'm going to go to town on this bottle, so to speak, with some negative criticism. So bottle, you're not really very attractive. You're made of plastic, and that's bad for the earth. And, you're a really strange shape. And when I drink water from you, I'm increasingly thinking that I really should be drinking water from a glass bottle. And honestly, that label's kind of ugly. It's blue. It's not a very nice blue. And your water doesn't taste that good after all. And, you're a pretty bad bottle. So now look at this bottle again after I told my story. And on some level, this neutral water bottle might seem less useful to you, somehow tainted. And the truth is that we tell these stories all the time, and not just about water bottles or things in the world. We tell these stories about ourselves. And we start to mistake these stories for reality. So diffusing, and I'm going to go now into two simple practices you can do to learn to diffuse. Diffusing can help us be more aware of these stories, of the judgments that our judging brain makes. And we can figure out how to tell a new story, how to maybe stop judging quite in the same way once we have that little bit of distance so that we're not feeling completely fused. So the first way to tackle fusion and to move towards diffusion is to observe thoughts. Now, when we observe thoughts, we can start to change them. So, for example, if we have a thought like, I am a failure, if we start to treat those thoughts like words we're typing on a computer, we can start to have a little more distance from them, words that we're observing. So now I am a failure can become, I am having the thought that I'm a failure. And that thought can even go one step further and say, I am noticing that I am having the thought that I'm a failure. Now, this seems really simple, but when we consistently just take a breath and observe our thoughts in this way, our mind starts to learn. Our mind starts to learn that what we took for reality, something like I'm a failure, might not be true because we rewrote it. So when this thought is something now that I'm noticing that I'm thinking about in this isolated moment in time, it doesn't have the same power. So this is a simple practice that, again, just by doing it, even when we don't believe it's going to work, but doing it repeatedly, trying it every day when we notice those thoughts that really shake us or that make us feel unmoored, that will give us the distance to react less, gain some perspective, and then we can really start to do something with this thought and question the reality of it. Now, the last activity to practice for more diffusion from our thoughts and feelings is something you can, that's sometimes called the sushi conveyor belt exercise. For those sushi lovers out there, you're going to know exactly what I mean in a minute. This is a visualization that we can use when we observe, let go of, and choose the thoughts that we want to engage with. This, again, we don't have to be captive to our thoughts. They're not reality. We can start gaining that distance and more control. So imagine I'm having a thought like, oh my God, I'm really going to mess up this webinar. and I'm observing this thought, and I can start to imagine that this thought and the one that comes after it, they're just like pieces of sushi passing me by on a sushi conveyor belt. And when you're facing a sushi conveyor belt, you don't choose the pieces of sushi that don't look so good. You don't choose the meh sushi, right? You observe them and you let them keep going. You don't have to make any efforts to do this. You just let them pass, because we know that more sushi will come, just like more thoughts will come. And we also know that those same thoughts tend to circle around. So we don't have to become attached to our thoughts when we think of them as something that will naturally passing through us and by us. We don't have to be attached. We can attend to each in turn. We can even, look a little closer, but then we can let it go until we're ready to pick up the thought, that delicious piece of sushi that we want to engage with and eat with and actually eat. So this practice of observing our thoughts and of understanding that thoughts are passing, are not forever, and we can observe them going by and pick and choose the ones we want. These are two approaches, visualizations that can really help disrupt diffusion when we start to feel stuck in a negative cycle. So I'm going to end the slideshow. I'm going to also stop the recording. And now we have time